I spend all day looking at radicalization pathways and the worst possible things that can happen online.
In terms of tracking, my biggest concern this time isn't Russian interference in the election. It's American mobilizations at polling places, threats of violence in terms of counting or ballots or ballot boxes.
Election security officials and academics say misinformation and disinformation have never been more of a threat to the U.S. election, especially as coronavirus concerns breed more confusion around the voting process, from misleading text messages to false social media posts shared by seemingly trusted sources. Bad actors are targeting many groups. And often the researchers tracking the content find themselves scrambling to keep up with those spreading the false or misleading information. The researchers flag it to the platforms, which also have their own monitoring services. What's at stake for the 2020 presidential election? What's the worst that could happen if misinformation runs rampant?
What are we opening ourselves up to? How are we normalizing the ingestion of information in quick 10-slide Instagram stories?
Isabella Garcia Camargo is a cybersecurity researcher at Stanford working on a coalition focused on detecting and mitigating misinformation during the election.
Even a year ago, a lot of people, if you talked about QAnon, nobody really knew what it was. Since COVID, though, and since the huge change in kind of the information landscape that came from that, the movement has really grown over the past couple of months, and we're seeing it pop up internationally even now.
The FBI has identified QAnon as a potential domestic terrorism threat. The far-right-wing, loosely organized network is one of the conspiracy theory groups that has gained traction since social distancing forced many people to more frequently interact online. And it's not just online platforms. Misinformation is spreading more through text messages or digital television ads, especially as social media firms crack down on such content.
I think it's important to recognize that more and more young people are getting their news from TikTok, getting their news from Instagram.
People are isolated and they are trying to figure out the world from a digital feed. Well, if that digital feed is being manipulated or bombarded with false information or being distorted through paid advertisements, it makes it very difficult for people to understand what's going on.
Clint Watts is a former FBI special agent and a distinguished fellow at the Foreign Policy Research Institute studying social media influence. Election security experts, like Clint, say inaccurate voter or polling information could mean some miss their chance to vote. While social media giants like Facebook and Twitter now have more stringent policies against content that could suppress voters, security officials are still worried about the damage done before misinformation is labeled or removed. Conspiracies that claim mail-in ballots aren't counted could dissuade some voters, and questions about the validity of election results could threaten the future of politics in America.
It's less one candidate will have an unfair advantage or the other one will. It's more like just generally mistrust in the outcome from the losing side or from any side here. If we start to erode the trust that we have in our democratic principles and in our democratic system, I think that has very, very long-term consequences.
I want people to know that their vote counted, and I want them to have confidence in that.
Misinformation has already spread in this election cycle. The legitimacy of mail-in ballots has been questioned by some, and in August, a number of Florida voters received a spoofed text message alleging Rep. Byron Donalds was dropping out of a congressional race. Soon after, Donalds tweeted that the text message shared false information, and he in fact was not dropping out.
If you continue to pump disinformation through the social media machine, and social media doesn't regulate to a degree like what is actual verifiable truth, lets deepfakes continue, those sorts of things, well, everyone loses in the end. The companies fall into a collapsing state, the politicians can't advance policy, and voters are just sort of left hanging in the balance.
Every single time that you post something to your story, that you like a tweet, your interactions are like a vote in this space. The most patriotic thing you can do is to just think a little bit before you like, before you tweet, before you share things.